All right, let's jump right in. We are dropping you smack dab in the middle of a crisis, one that threatened to completely unravel an entire empire. The year is 324 BC, and Alexander the Great, the supposed master of the known world, is about to face his most dangerous enemy yet, his own army.
So can you imagine? That's what his soldiers are screaming at him. It's this furious, deeply personal insult hurled right at their king. See, they weren't just angry, they were mocking his claim to be the son of the god Zeus Ammon. And in doing that, they were basically rejecting him as their Macedonian leader.
So the big question is, what on earth pushed these victorious, battle-hardened veterans? I mean, these are the guys who had followed him all the way from Greece to India. What pushed them to the absolute brink of revolt? Well, it was a long time coming.
The thing that finally lit the fuse. You'd think it was a generous offer, right? A reward for years of loyal service? But it landed on bone-dry tinder, and the whole thing was ready to just go up in flames.
On the surface, this was supposed to be a kindness, a reward. But his men, they didn't see it that way. Not at all. They saw it as a dismissal. They were absolutely convinced he was just getting rid of them to build a new army, replacing his loyal Macedonians with foreign troops.
But look, this was about so much more than just going home. To really get their fury, you have to try and see it from their perspective. Imagine you've been at war for a decade, thousands of miles from everything you've ever known. You are just spent. And then you look over and you see your king starting to look and act like the very enemy you've been fighting. Now, Alexander had his reasons, of course. He was trying to rule this vast, multicultural empire. But to his men, it just felt like a total betrayal. He's wearing Persian clothes, he's adopting their customs, he even marries a so-called barbarian princess. And then the ultimate insult. He starts putting foreign soldiers into their elite units. They felt like their king was becoming a complete stranger.
Now, what's really interesting here is that this wasn't the first time his army had defied him. Nope, it was the second. And the crucial thing to remember is that the first time this happened, way back in India, the army had actually won.
To really get a sense of their exhaustion, you've got to look at this timeline. We're talking 10 years of marching and fighting across the entire known world. From crossing into Asia in 334 BC to crushing the Persian Empire at Gaugamela, all the way to the plains of India. By the time they reached the Hyphus River in 326 BC, after almost a decade of nonstop war, they hit a wall.
So yeah, 2 years before this showdown at Opis at the Hyphasis River, the army just stopped. They were worn out, their equipment was shot, and they'd been soaked by 70 straight days of monsoon rains. They simply refused to march one more step into India. They were done.
In this slide right here, it lays out the difference perfectly. On the left, you've got the Hyphasis mutiny. Alexander locked himself in his tent for 3 days, but when he saw his men wouldn't budge, he gave in. He actually turned the army around. The army won. But over on the right, at Opis, things were totally different. This wasn't about being tired. This was a direct shot at his authority. And this time, he was absolutely determined to win. Faced with this open rebellion, Alexander did not back down. No way. Instead, he unleashed this calculated 4-part psychological assault. It was designed to do one thing: break his men's will and remind them exactly who was in command. Okay, let's break down this absolute masterclass in manipulation. It starts with pure shock and awe. He has the loudest guys arrested and executed, right there in front of everyone. Then, and only then, with the army just stunned into silence, does he begin step 2. Shaming them with one of the most famous speeches in history. He doesn't even start with himself. He starts with his father, Philip. He's shaming them by reminding them where they came from, that they were just poor shepherds in the mountains before Philip forged them into the greatest army on earth. He's basically saying, you were nothing before my family made you something. It's a low blow, and it's totally intentional. Then, he completely flips the script. He starts listing their incredible achievements, but he frames every single victory as a personal gift from him to them. The wealth of Egypt is now yours. The treasures of Persia belong to you. He paints this picture of them as governors and generals just dripping with riches, and then he contrasts it with his own supposed sacrifice, claiming all he kept for himself was his royal cloak and crown. And this is where he really goes for the heart. He challenges any man in the crowd to show his scars, declaring he will show his own in return. He reminds them that he never, ever asked them to go anywhere he wouldn't lead, that he fought and he bled right there alongside every single one of them. And he ends with the final, absolutely crushing act of shaming.
He doesn't just dismiss them, he commands them to leave, to go home and tell everyone that they abandoned their king in a foreign land, leaving him to be protected by the very enemies they had conquered together. And then, with one final contemptuous word, "Depart," he turns his back and walks away.
And you know what? The whole strategy worked. It worked perfectly. The combination of the executions, that devastating speech, and then his final power move, appointing Persians to command positions, it completely and utterly broke the mutiny.
That move, seeing Persians appointed to their command positions, that was the final straw. It terrified them. The Macedonian soldiers rushed to his tent, literally weeping and begging him for forgiveness. This standoff was over. Alexander hadn't just won, he had reasserted his absolute authority. And then, in a brilliant final move, he reconciled with them, giving them the one honor they craved more than anything. He called them his kinsmen.
And to really seal the deal, he holds this massive banquet. We're talking 9,000 guests, seating his Macedonian veterans right next to their Persian counterparts. This was the ultimate symbol of his grand vision, a new fused Greco-Persian empire. A bond he tried to strengthen even more by arranging mass marriages between his officers and Persian noblewomen. But that leaves us with this big, hanging question, doesn't it? Was this a genuine moment of unity? Was this the act of a visionary leader trying to build a brand new kind of world? Or was it something darker? As the historian Arian hints, was this all just a masterclass in manipulation? The desperate act of an arrogant king whose incredible success had dangerously inflated his own ego? The answer, just like the man himself, remains incredibly complex.